Welcome to Warriors Over 50. I'm Jonathan McGuinness and I'm on a health journey. I've been very successful so far. I'm now down to 83 kilos when I started at 90 kilos. And I wanted the first podcast to be with someone who provoked me, pushed me, even when I didn't want to be pushed. And that's my son, Michael McGuinness.
Hi,
Michael.
Hi, I'm Michael, and this is the first podcast, and clearly I'm over 50, so it's a really good start to the podcast. And I've witnessed your journey from many years ago. I pushed you many different ways, and you've pushed me in many different ways, and it's gonna be interesting to have a open and honest conversation about how you got to this level of success as well.
Absolutely. Well, maybe let me start with where I'm at right now. I'm 84.5 kilos trend weight. I'm 83 kilos scale weight. That'll become apparent why those two different metrics are important. But I'm down to where my goal was originally. And there's a secondary goal as well, which I'll talk about right now, is I'm down to 25.0% body fat, which is actually the threshold for obesity. So I'm still obese, even though I'm 83 kilos. And that's a whole conversation in itself, and we'll get to Michael on it. But what I want to say is I've lost over 15 kilos. I've lost over 5% body fat. I'm starting to feel like I'm in my 20s again, even though I'm in my 50s. And I want to share the lessons learned, we could say, of what I've done, what I haven't done, the mistakes I've made, and probably one of the more critical eyes, and I mean that in a positive way, is Michael, in terms of one, even provoking me, but as I'm doing things that are working, not working. He's my coach. I call him up and I say, Michael, I want to train in a different way or eat in a different way. What do you suggest? Mm-hmm. So, one, I'm delighted to be here, but I want to tell the backstory to it, because a lot of people think, oh yeah, okay, it's great. You see a photo on Instagram or Facebook and you've lost loads of weight, etc. But it's not a straight line. It's far from it, and I can put up the graphics later of how bumpy a road that has been, even in terms of graphs. Michael, let's start back with, before we get into my story, tell us a little bit about your training, because you've come to me with a lot of understanding of how you train physically, what you eat, how you sleep, and that has definitely been big input into my journey. So tell me about you and where you're at first.
Sure. So I've been doing sport all my life, which is very important, because sometimes I need to take that into consideration, especially when I am talking to people who haven't done sport in a while. So it's actually been interesting to balance it, because you're also not the only person I talk to, and other people I talk to, I realize there's a difference when you've been doing sport for a long time. And so I think it's worthwhile to note also, when we get into the future and why some of your past attempts failed, is I was thinking from this mind frame, and you've taught me a lot in that context. Anyway, so I've done a lot of sport my whole life, got to the point where I was doing, some of them at a competitive level, thanks to you mainly, let's be honest. And that kind of just kept going. Where my own personal real learning journey started was when I was in secondary school, and I quit rugby because I didn't like it anymore. It was boring, whatever. I wasn't enjoying myself, and there was no PE in school. And being sporty for a while, I started getting a little chubbier and a little lazier, and so at that point I tried calisthenics, because it's one of the only things I could do at home.
Yeah.
And that was not about 10 years ago. I don't remember the exact time frame. And that's kind of when I started learning. So I want to give credit to a few YouTubers in particular who taught me a lot at the beginning, including one of the guys who pushed me forward a lot was Dominic Sky. He had a few videos, but he really helped me learn a lot about different exercises. And over the years that has evolved. So for a while I did loads of calisthenics. I focused on skills. I got to some pretty high level skills, as you know, including one arm pull-ups and some handstand stuff and all that. And then recently, in the last few years, I wanted to try out more hypertrophy training, because I realized I was really strong, but I desired to look a little better.
So can I just ask you, can you explain, because hypertrophy is a big word.
Sure. Yeah.
Most people don't actually know what it is. What is hypertrophy training?
So hypertrophy is the muscle growth, in short. So hyper means bigger, So it's bigger.
Yeah.
Trophy, I think, just means growth, but it refers in particular to muscle growth. It's the opposite of atrophy.
So when somebody says, though, like, because a lot of it involves weight training, and resistance training, or strength training, or power training, is it different to them, or
so
how does it relate to them?
So there's kind of a few different categories of training, and the basis for most things, and we'll get into it, is the amount of muscle you have and your bone density, and a lot of that gets trained with hypertrophy training. Then there's kind of two types. So there's kind of very mechanical training, and then there's skill training. So strength is actually a neurological process. Power, neurological process. Speed, endurance, they're all kind of neurological efficiencies. Meanwhile, hypertrophy it's very much the opposite. And we can, I think I'm starting to get a little bit ahead of myself, but the point is training your muscles at a disadvantage in order to grow them. And given that I'd always trained strength, which is trying to do the technique in a way where you can lift as much, or in my case, do the hardest skill possible, it was very interesting to then start training in this way where you were trying to make it as hard as possible for yourself. So in order to do well in calisthenics, because I don't want to just focus on the training side, I wanted to lose weight, because the lighter you are, kind of, and we can get into more detail, the better. And so at that point, I started doing my own first explorations in nutrition, which were not healthy. Sure. Looking back at it, it meant almost starving myself at times, but I didn't know any better. I remember I went 2 years without a single dessert because, well, I don't know, so I'm just going to go to the extreme. And then over the years, with loads of teachers, because it wasn't just me, I learned a lot from books and from, as I mentioned, YouTubers and, future, more recent ones and everything.
And who would be your top 3 at the moment then, for example?
At the moment, honestly, I haven't been watching too much, but I'd say Mike Isertel is definitely a reference point when I'm, I don't know, I value his opinion highly, because he has a very kind of methodical approach to things, and at least he explains it well. And so if I disagree, he gives me a good reason to disagree rather than take me on my word, I have to say, though, before we continue, my weakness is definitely sleep, right? I understand a good bit of it, but it is not my strength. So when we get into everything, I like, it's not like I know everything, far from it. And it's not like I'm good at it. And sometimes I know things and I don't do them anyway. So it's a journey for everyone. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely.
Anyway,
so
that's enough.
Thanks very much, Michael. What I'd like to say is, where was I at? Mm-hmm. Like, I'll give you my interpretation, and this is really why I want you here, is because I'd love another interpretation of, for my whole life, I've been doing sports, but in a very on-off type way. I would do a run and I would train for it for 3 or 6 months, and then I would do nothing for 3 or 6 months. And I had these sort of cycles of doing the solo run in Zurich, and I would train for 6 months very hard, do very well, and then had a 3 or 6 months of doing nothing until that or another challenge of some sort. I'd play squash for a few years and then not do it. So I had this sort of a project challenge approach, and then a nothing. But I never really had an ongoing consistent. So I would have never considered myself a consistent sports person, but I would have said to anybody, give me a challenge anytime and I will rise to that challenge to the best of my ability. And I always felt the lack of consistency or kind of, but at the same time resented it, the routine, or didn't want to do it. I kind of had this sort of love-hate relationship with, I would like to be consistent, but a routine feels like, going into prison or something else like that. And I have that would be most of my life, literally until maybe last year.
Actually, something I want to say is, at least from the outside, and do correct me if I'm wrong, the way you spoke as if you still had your 20-year-old body. So you were, I could do the challenge, or I can be inconsistent, and you talk about it because I'm still an athlete, when the reality, looking at, and now you've realized that, times change and everything, was that you weren't anymore. 20 years had passed, you'd been working, but you did talk as if you still had that 25-year-old body that you could, you can trash a 25-year-old body. Right?
Now I can look back and say I was in total denial the fact that I had got any older than 25. Let's put it that way. Like, I was in denial, so I was like, oh yeah, I can take it on as if, and I wasn't literally listening to my body.
Yeah, and honestly, even for 25-year-olds, because I am 25, you can only go so hard. Like, your body can only tolerate so much. This worsens with time, especially if you do neglect it to a certain degree. But the problem is when you try to go too intense, it's unsustainable. No matter what you are, no matter what age you are. There's people who are 20, younger than me, not that it makes a big difference, but younger than me, that struggle with this. They do, and they're 20. They're not even 40 or 50. And they go hard for a few weeks. Sometimes they get injured. And to get injured when you're 20 because you're going too hard means you're doing something really, really wrong as well. And so so it's just a matter of, I think and we can get into it better, what has happened with you is you've learned to look at the world for what it is better. It's like lifting a veil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, before I started last year, because in July I had a kind of a mental breakthrough. I'm always working on self-development and see what assumptions am I making, etc., etc. And I realized one thing that made the breakthrough for me, even though many things have happened, this is probably the straw that broke the camel's back, was I've always resisted authority. I kind of, almost hated authority, had a rebel position towards, whether that's parents, school, government, whatever else it is. But I made a fundamental mistake around authority. I actually put my own authority in the same bucket. And what that meant was anyone who told me to do something, I would resist it. But that also meant if I told myself to do something, eventually I would resist it or self-sabotage, even if it was good for me. So even if it was like, take care of your health, eventually I would sort of undermine myself because I didn't even want my own authority. And I sort of made this split between, hold on, my authority, if I say something for me that's good for me with good intent, I should take that as go with it and stick with it. And other people who want me to do stuff, okay, I can still resist. It's different. Now, they may or may not have good intent, and that's a whole other question. But I never had made that split. I had put all of authority into one bucket. And by making that one split, I am now, I think it's 1 year and 3 months in, and I'm kept going.
Yeah,
I haven't self-sabotaged myself because I see my directive to myself to get healthy as something I now want to follow.
Actually, I think very much along those lines is, and I think it'll may help understand this better, is you saw all limits as a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Any kind of, I'm trapped. Like you'd feel like you were trapped. And authority is, a good way to describe it. I think limits are another way to describe it. So even limiting the types of food you can have, even though the outcome is good, the idea of a limit made you want to rebel.
Oh, I learned a lot about limits during this.
And I think what I've seen, and you can go into it further, is that limits are good. Like well-placed limits actually allow you to be better. It's not that limits themselves are a problem. You know what I mean? So how would you see this specific topic around limit?
I actually now have a good respect for healthy limits. Like I'll bring up a few examples around food later, like putting food back in the pan when I've hit my calorie limit for the day was like, that was an emotional blow my mind moment,
Yeah.
I just want to go back to the beginning of this first, and then we'll get into each of the elements. Is just before I had that breakthrough with authority, I remember it was probably only a week or two, I said, I don't want to keep looking back to my best. Like I ran the 5K really well when I was 24 in New York. I've done other things, and I kept looking back to them, and I kind of said, well, I want
the glory
to be,
days,
the glory days, the golden years, or whatever people want to call them. I said, I actually want to be looking forward to the best things in my life. Otherwise, I'm sort of giving up and living more passively. and I want to live actively, and that means looking forward to things. So ideally, I want to be able to run that 5K faster than I did in 1994. Now, whether I'll get there or not, but the fact that I'm striving in that direction has just brought a new energy. And then when I had set that goal, up came this sort of authority thing, and then I dissolved it rather than what would have happened before, is I would have got blocked by it rather than resolving it.
What do you think helped you get into the position to be able to really face this authority thing? Because it was broader than your health, right? This wasn't a health thing. This was a fundamental breakthrough in how Jonathan views the world.
Absolutely.
And then health happened to be a good consequence from it. But because I think potentially you're not the only one who thinks this, and they see, oh, great for you, you beat this authority, but like, what allowed you to get into the position to be open-minded enough to say, maybe this is a problem?
I have continuously been working on what are my assumptions, and I think the thing I'm getting better at, and this is why I'm even a little bit nervous about the conversation, is I'm more and more open to feedback. I used to resist feedback because I didn't want to hear what I didn't want to hear. You know, it was that simple. And kind of that working on what are my assumptions, and you know, I read a lot of self-development books and whatever. And I actually do the exercise, not just reading them. I do the exercises. I kind of, you know, I talk through them, and I think by doing it for years and years, eventually I've opened up the door or the gap wide enough to now start to listen to feedback. And when it came to that point, one of the things was, and that was last July as well, you came to me and you said, Dad, you're over 25% body fat. That means you're obese, and that means your risks of medical things happening are a lot higher.
Yeah.
Couple of things there. One is I didn't even know that obesity was a body fat percentage. I thought it was a certain weight, and maybe there are multiple definitions, but I didn't know that definition. And then I kind of was open enough to accept the feedback that, hold on, that might be a reality. If I don't take care of this, I could have problems down the line, so I want to take care of it.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, so I'll be honest here. I remember I pestered you for years. I was like, all right, come on, start training. And honestly, I got disappointed many times because I might be with you for 2 weeks, but then, you know, I'd go somewhere else to come back and I find that you haven't done any training. So, and it was just like, come on. Like, you know, do I have to like hold your hand? And so I remember going and being disappointed and going and being disappointed. And so I think over time, I gave up a little bit, but not in the sense because I wanted it to be worse, but I think I also then started just kind of being a little harsher over time. I started just kind of saying things and like saying it in a way, and I think that was one of the things I was like, you're just that more at risk, you know, like this is, you're actually genuinely worse. I felt like I could just, well, not even I could. If I'm not this direct, he's not listening as well, you know, and it has to do with taking feedback. And so I think that's how I also got, now I learned myself, like I was learning this whole time, right? It's not like I know what I even knew a year ago. I know more than I do a year ago. And so when I found that out, I was like, because I think also you're tall, you hide it. So potentially you're like, I'm really not that bad. Like, yeah, maybe I have a little bit of a beer belly. I think what you'd say is, oh, I'm a little bloated. It's like, you're like 30-something% body fat, man. You know what I mean? That's not bloated. No, anyway, yeah. So I think I remember that when I started saying these things, it was sinking in, and I don't know exactly what it was, but I'm sure other stuff was happening at the same time where, you know, the kind of the reality of the situation was hitting you. It's like, yeah, I'm not 20. Like even now, Warriors Over 50, I was kind of surprised when you named it that because of the acceptance and the specifically going people over a certain age. It's like, oh, interesting. Because he's not Warriors, right? He's Warriors Over 50. And the fact that you take the kind of, you want to train to increase health span, longevity, all that kind of stuff, which we'll get into. It very much, I can see how much your perspective has matured. You're not a 20-year-old who's like, you know, fuck it, let's go do the thing, let's go do the hard challenge, let's go destroy myself, screw the consequences. You're starting with the consequences. And so I know I keep jumping back and forward, but you know, it's a lot of stuff has happened.
And like even I want to go back again now, because I think the first point was really the kitchen and food, and that's where I weighed myself. I have the Renfo scale, I put it in now, and that was 98.9 kilos, dangerously close to 100 kilos. And I just want to say a little bit about my relationship with food before then. The idea was always more was better. I had no limits with respect to food. I would just eat out of emotion, out of hunger, out of boredom, and it didn't, you know, going out would always be a thing, go to a restaurant, do this, that or the other, but not for a reason. It was almost like, I feel like every celebration when I was young was around food, and kind of that meant, oh well, if I had something I could celebrate, I could eat more to do with it. And it was just it was an unlimited and very emotional relationship. And when I would get even nervous or angry if I didn't eat, and you know, all of these sort of, you know,
because you asked me on board, sometimes when he eats he makes me nervous, and that's changing over time. But to the, like, imagine it was to the point that externally, as somebody looking at you, I get, sometimes, not always, it's not like every time, but I get nervous watching you. Like, you'd make me nervous, which I think says a lot about how you felt about food. You know what I mean? It was like this like almost animal way of approaching food.
I was definitely in a state of reaction and drama. It wasn't a normal, responsible eating mode. And I think that was the demon that was going to I'd have to face and deal with over the coming months. So on July 30th was the first day that I took my weight. I just, for clarity, I was 98.9 kilos and I was 30.4% body fat. And that was my starting point.
Is that like, that's not just obese actually, I think that's like more than that. I can't remember.
Morbidly obese maybe. I don't know
if it's morbidly obese, but like there's like levels of obesity.
Yeah, it's not good. It's definitely not good. Whatever it is.
Sticking my finger.
So the first thing was, I was, you know, we talked about it, and I was to have a certain amount of calories and have a certain amount of protein. But the first month for me was a mess. I don't know why, but priority for me was, I need this amount of protein, whatever it was, 160 grams of protein a day or 70 grams of protein a day. And I was eating the protein, but I didn't give a diddlies about the calories. So I was going way over on the calories. So for the first 2 weeks, I was actually putting on more weight because I didn't understand that calories is number one and protein was number two. I thought if I get the protein, I'm doing what I should be doing. So I spent 2 to 3 weeks of putting on weight and not fully understanding, and I'm sure we had several conversations.
Oh, we had loads. I remember late at night, like, you know, like thinking about priorities and everything.
Yeah.
I remember outside the bar, the wine bar or whatever it's called a few times and everything, just kind of understanding. So for me, it was understanding and figuring out how to help you understand a reprioritization strategy, basically, right? So okay, you have these ideas. You know, I used to think when I was young and naive that you could just tell something to somebody, right, and they would understand, and they would.
It's not that simple.
It's not that simple. So I had to learn a lot about. Okay, so it is simple if I say it out. Like, I can say it out in a minute, but you don't get it. Why don't you get it? What specifically about you? Like, why the protein? And I think potentially it was because you may have grown up with like the Arnolds, the, you know, eat a lot of protein.
Oh yeah, I watched Flex magazine, all of that when I went to the gym as a teenager.
And you know, they used to eat thousands of calories, but they were massive.
And they were training.
Well. And they were training. They were doing so many things, and so it was. I think, and this is actually more of a general comment about people's outlook on fitness, is we focus on that last 5% because it's the interesting 5%. it's the other 95% that has most of the effect. So it's the last 5% is like, oftentimes, if somebody says I want to get in shape, what will they think about? Supplements. The supplements is like the last thing you need to worry about. Where are your calories? Are you going to the gym? Have you been doing it consistently for months? Are you consistently putting on weight? Are you sleeping well? Like, there's so many, but they're all boring, right? And I think something that really came across to you was you started doing the boring stuff, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing, and I think it was a lot of conversations with you, and there was one thing I watched from Brian Johnson, the longevity guy, because he invests $2 million a year in doctors getting feedback, and he said, in terms of investment, you get more from getting good sleep, and then secondly, from good nutrition, and thirdly, from exercise. And I kind of heard it and I accepted it, but it took a while to actually assimilate it to myself, because my whole life I thought I could eat whatever I want, and I would only change my eating if I was changing what I was doing. When I was swimming for a while, I'd have a salad a few hours before I go for a swim, so I wouldn't want a heavy stomach or whatever. It was kind of like...
It was the opposite. I had the opposite.
Well, no, it wasn't even the opposite, because sleep wasn't even on my radar. So I had exercise at number one.
Yeah.
I had diet at number two when it sort of...
It was very much for training.
It was for training, and then sleep wasn't even there. And this hierarchy, somehow I accept it, and we had loads of conversations, and I think you were already on that sort of line of thinking.
Yeah.
Made me realize I'm going to have more leverage in the kitchen than I am in the gym or running or whatever else. So kind of, it's not one thing, even though we're picking things in this conversation, I'm trying to pick out a number of the things that actually influence, and when he said that was the hierarchy, that made a switch in my mind that okay, well, if eating is going to be higher leverage than exercise, I need to pay more attention.
In fact, for ages you were eating better, but you were barely exercising consistently.
Oh yeah,
but you made way more progress.
Absolutely. I'd say for 3 or 4 months I went on a cut, and I was actually losing weight, but I thought, I'm getting all this progress, but why do I need to go to the gym, sort of thing, because I was losing the weight, but little did I know, I was obviously losing more muscle than I could have if I had have been doing both, but I wasn't ready to actually take on both sets of those things at the same time, I would say,
I want to discuss this weight conversation further, but I think I would like to step back into when you were thinking about exercise, like what made you kind of go, because you were always exercise, like I want to be Bruce Lee, I don't know who were some of your idols, right?
Martial arts,
and so they were all exercise, right? Food was never something much discussed, or if it was eat a steak, eat chicken, I don't know what else, egg whites, all that kind of stuff, so loads of protein, which was very obvious in how you approached it. So what flipped the switch that specifically nutrition? Because I remember the Brian Johnson thing, but before that there was let me look at the food before the exercise. Like, do you remember when a switch flipped there?
I think the switch, it didn't flip. It was kind of, I remember you saying to me, you're 25% and you're obese, or you're over 25% and you're obese. I'm actually 25% now. I'm 83 kilos and I'm on the obesity. I'm
That's
looking
15
forward.
15 kilos later, is it?
15 kilos later, right? And I just, it didn't click in that moment. It clicked while I made the decision, okay, I want to have something to look forward in the future. The idea of authority came up, and then go on the diet came up, and I went on the diet, and
I remember something I told you.
What?
Which was I clarified, I think losing weight versus losing body fat as well. Because all of a sudden body fat became important. And in order to lose weight, you need to be at a caloric deficit. Right? That's all it requires. There's actually nothing else that you need to lose weight. Now the thing is, most people don't want to lose weight. they actually want to lose body fat. And there is a bit more to it than that.
Absolutely.
Losing weight is a part of it, but, and you know, that this is a more long-term thing, you can actually lose body fat and not lose weight in the long term as well. So even just that idea is like, okay, well, how does that work? So in order to lose weight, you want to be at a caloric deficit, which means eating an amount of calories that keeps your weight and then subtracting a certain amount from that and making sure you consistently lose weight.
Yeah.
So I think you then started measuring your weight every day, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And it became a real part of life. Like, okay, this is a reality I have to face every day probably as well.
Absolutely.
But before we get into that too much, in order to lose body fat, there's two more things that are required. Not desired, but required. One is eating enough protein. Why? Because you want to make sure that the muscles are fed enough in order to stick around. Because otherwise you just lose weight. And losing weight can mean losing body fat and losing muscle. And then the other thing, because it will fed from what, is doing resistance training. So you actually don't, and you might do to a degree, but you don't properly lose body fat even at a basic level. So, you know, we can get more complex in this, but even at a basic level, unless you're actually doing all three of those things, which is being at a caloric deficit while eating enough protein and doing resistance training.
So I would say when I started,
Yeah.
I was only doing the first two for a long time. I wasn't consistently doing the training, but I'd like to get into even taking on the diet and weighing myself every day. Weight is an output, it's a result.
Yeah.
The interesting thing was you gave me an app called MacroFactor to do the input. I know food scales and measure everything and put it in.
Yeah.
And what I realized is I actually started telling the truth to MacroFactor. So I didn't. You don't talk to the app. You actually put it in or whatever. But
even worse. it's worse to write things down than it is to say them.
Yeah, but like I was like I had to. If this was going to work, I would actually have to start being honest with the app and say I ate this, even if I should or shouldn't have vetted.
You came and you were like, I'm being honest. There was an actual...
Because I think when I used to eat chocolate bars or I used to eat this and the other, not only would I hide the wrapper somewhere in the bin where someone wouldn't see it, because I'd be denying it to other people that I was doing it, I was denying it to myself. And actually this MacroFactor just happens to be the app we were using. This won't work unless I tell the truth about the inputs, because the output of the weight of the scale will happen if I do the right inputs. And being transparent with the app was actually a breakthrough for me. In terms of stop denying what I'm not doing, not to others, but to myself. You know?
No, definitely. I think you had to learn how to just, you know, be more honest. And it's true, I think it was this MacroFactor thing, if I remember correctly, that kind of sent you on a bit of an honesty journey as well. And it was because every day you had to write in the full truth and nothing but the truth, if you know what I mean. Right? And something that MacroFactor does, and I think that's actually evolving, and I don't necessarily agree, which I really like, is you either put in all of your calories for a day or none of them. Because doing this partial tracking is actually detrimental, as in it doesn't really help. So you had to put in that biscuit. You had to put in, and I think you love the biscuits. You had to put in that biscuit. You had to put in that snack, and you know those snacks. You could see how they started adding up. But that wasn't really the point. The point was just, oh, okay, this is what's actually happening. The illusion I'm under, you know, even the illusion of age. A lot of this was just moving out of, not even denial, because I think for a lot of this, it can also just be put down to ignorance. Like you didn't know. It was just putting a big lens on reality.
I would actually say that I'm on two journeys. One is an ignorance reduction journey, because I realise how much I don't know and I'm still learning, but I've already reduced my ignorance significantly in that department. And the other is a lie reduction as well. A lie, deny, whatever we want to call it, to myself. Both of those had to happen. One was a reduction in my ignorance of what to do, what works, and the other was to stop lying to myself or denying what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Because if I can't be honest, the rest won't work either.
Yeah. And I remember you told me many times, like, I put in everything. This wasn't a one-time thing either, so it was a big deal to put in. And you were putting things in even if you went way over the calories, and I think that it didn't matter almost what the calories were. It was the journaling it down that made the biggest difference.
Well, there's one thing now, and I think we touched on it already at the beginning, but I remember 3 weeks in, we were having a nice pasta with mussels out on the balcony.
Yeah.
And it was the first time where I was getting good enough at tracking what I was doing that I would weigh the food and then put it in the tracker and just see what, and it was coming to the end of the day, so when we were having dinner, and the amount that was put on my plate was more than my daily budget. And I remember, and this was the first time, I was 51, I'm 52 now, it was the first time in my life where I actually put a spoon on my own plate and I put it back into the pan.
Yeah.
And that was like, it was the first time in my life I ever consciously remember giving back food. I was always attempting to take more food.
Yeah.
And that was actually a really emotional moment for me to sort of say, okay, that's my calorie budget for the day.
Yeah.
This is whatever, 100 grams too much, I need to take 100 grams or whatever and put it back in the pan. And it was like, and even the second and third time that I did that over the next few weeks, it was hard.
Yeah. You mentioned it.
You know,
shows how much it.
Oh yeah, like I know I'm saying.
Like it wasn't something small that you did that wasn't even worth mentioning. No, this is like a thing. I can't believe I did this.
But that's back to what you said in the beginning about limits. As in, that was probably the first day where I showed my respect for a limit, or I thought that limit is going to help me get where I want to go.
More than that 50 grams of pasta or whatever.
Absolutely, yeah. So if I don't respect this limit, what am I doing?
Yeah.
And it was another challenge as well because I've had different influences. One was a lot of people, when they go for a diet or a cut, they try to go from wherever they're at, like let's say I was nearly 99 kilos, to 83 all in one go.
99.
So well, it was almost 99. I just say 99 because rather than the longer thing. And you kept saying to me, hold on now, it's better to do things in a way that where you do a period of cut and then a period of maintenance, a period of cut. And I didn't quite listen in the beginning. No. And I kind of went all the way to Christmas.
So what happened specifically was we were like, all right, 6 weeks at this rate. And I was like, do 6 weeks. It's just better if you do 6 weeks. And then, next time you can do 7 weeks.
But I didn't take that on until 2024. In
no, you
2023,
yeah.
I did.
So we told you. So we agreed to 6 weeks. Right?
Sure.
So we agreed, right?
And I saw the success. My weight kept going down. I kept going down, going down. All the way until December.
Well, no, I remember when the 6 weeks passed, we were like, well, I feel pretty good.
Yeah, and I just kept going.
No, I think it's really important because this is where because I think it's in the small things a lot of people lose it, right? And what happened was like, well, I feel pretty good. And I was like, I think it'd be better to stop. You know what I mean? Like we agreed to 6 weeks. Let's do what we agreed, and next time let's agree on something better or something longer. And you're like, oh no, but I feel pretty good. And I'm like, I promise you feel good until you won't, and then you'll overeat. It's like, no. Okay, 7 weeks, and it was still the same. And it was 8 weeks, and then something happened. I found out that you're doing like 1 or 2 binges in the middle of the night or something. And
I think it was even a lot longer than that.
It might have been 10 weeks. Yeah. The point was, it was like we agreed to something, and then to be fair, maybe we could have agreed to something a bit longer, but you were trying to really hit the you actually hit the limit, and you went over the limit, right? And that's where oftentimes people fail, because it's like, okay, but wouldn't it be more intelligent to stop and then learn from that experience and do it better further next time.
Because I was succeeding, I couldn't see the point of stopping.
Exactly.
I kind of got greedy for the success as fast as possible.
You binged.
But there was another part to that, Michael. That is correct, but there was another part. There was a part when I actually, even though I was dieting, I wasn't losing, I was cutting, I wasn't losing any more weight. Like I literally was following it, but I also wasn't losing any more weight. And this was going on for like
a few weeks,
2-3 weeks maybe. And then I had a chat with you, and then you said, well, you know what happens when your body goes into survival? Because it wasn't about my mind now, it was actually my body was working against me. Maybe you can explain it.
Yeah, so basically your body, is smart. It doesn't want to lose weight, because the reason we're so prone to putting on weight is because, it's better for us when we have a lack of food. The problem is modern day society, that never happens. And so when you start losing a certain amount of weight, it'll fight and do everything it can to make sure you keep on that weight. So for the first few weeks, it's fine because it's a bit of a shock and you've got loads of excess weight, so it's not too worried about it. But it got to the point where the stress levels from the dieting, literally on a physiological, not even just a psychological level, were high enough that it was doing everything it could. And without realizing it, you were probably walking less. You're probably doing loads of things that made sure you kept that weight, and that went on for a while. And I think there was this assumption that I just I eat this amount of calories and I keep going. Actually, something else to mention is the amount of calories you need to use to eat to lose weight doesn't stay static. It decreases over time because your body gets used to a new level of calories. It's trying to hold on as much as it can. It deems it as precious. And so it slowly drops. It gets to a point where it starts getting unsustainably low. So what was probably happening with you is getting to near that point. And so your weight started to plateau, but your calorie necessity was dropping so fast that the app, but more than anything, your ability to eat that little couldn't keep up as well. Right? Was there anything else you remember in particular?
Yeah, well, there was a couple of things. About the stress, you said your body holds on to things like, for example, salt and things like that, which hold water, which actually kind of it's the body trying to maintain its weight. And then when you said eventually, then we had a conversation and said go on maintenance. When I went on the maintenance,
finally,
after 2 or 3 days, I started losing weight again because my body relaxed from taking on the food. And I said, hold on, I'm on maintenance. You've just given me more calories, but I'm losing weight. And it was going the exact opposite way, because I thought the transition from a cut to maintenance would meant I'm going to bump back up. And it probably is if you do it in a more methodical way. But because I had stretched my cut success, if you want to call it, for so long, that when I hit maintenance, my weight actually went down because the body relaxed.
And you relaxed. You actually
really
relaxed.
Yeah.
And I think you could feel, I think it was kind of an acceptance of the fact that, this does have an effect on me as well. You know what I mean? Like cutting, it does actually affect your mentality, your body, everything about you. And trying to just push it might not actually be beneficial. I think that's when you started realizing it.
And that's when I started realizing it. And that was the very end of 2023. Now I went to travel at the beginning of 2024 for a couple of months. So my weight went up again because I didn't
Well, not so. I think this is a whole point to talk about. Well, because you've had future success in this.
Yeah, well, so I didn't maintain it when I travelled. That was my issue. I didn't maintain it. So a lot of the weight, and I can easily show the graph, went back on again. Even though I had got down to a significant, I don't remember the number now, it went back up significantly. But I knew I wanted to get back on the horse. So between January and March, I went off. I did what you call a yo-yo. I literally went back up. I travelled. I didn't stick to it. I gave myself the excuse that I'm travelling, I can't do it, and this, that and the other. And I was still probably running a bit, doing a bit of weights, but not in the consistent way that I should have been. And one thing I want to say, I'm from Ireland, and maybe it doesn't make any difference. The amount of alcohol I've had in the last year is like, it doesn't come into the house anymore. I think I've had it about 10 times in the whole year, and it's like I probably, a couple of them was even during that time, a few pints of Guinness or whatever else it was, because alcohol has such an impact, for at least I can see, because I weigh myself every day, for about 3 days it has like an impact on my weight. Until I start that normal thing again. So it's that's one factor that I think was important for me. I'm not against it, but like literally you can count on my two hands the amount of times I've had it in the last year, you know.
But for you, at least externally to me, it looked like it's like how you would treat a snack. So you'd often have a beer with a lot of your meals.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
not
like
every
dinner
meal.
or whatever. Yeah, absolutely.
Right, and this is probably not your favorite story because you got mad at me and I'm about to say it in public.
Yeah.
Aaron, my little brother, was asking me what an alcoholic was when we were walking around, and I didn't know. How do you explain to like a 5-year-old what an alcoholic is that has loads of problems? And so, not that you actually were, so I don't want to imply that you were, but you drank it often enough that the best way to explain it to Aaron in that moment, from what I could tell, was, well, it's kind of like that. They have it all the time, even though it's unnecessary. Right?
Yeah.
It was the idea of, and now it's not what it is. I think we can all accept that that's not what it was. But the point is, it was a big part of your meals. You see, like how
I
you might have
I saw it as a cold drink to go with dinner.
Exactly. But you now learned it actually had a big impact.
Massive.
Yeah. So.
And now it's gone from life really as such, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no. It's crazy actually.
But then when March came around, I said I'd start again, but the difference was, and I made a choice, because I remember you saying to me somewhere between 6 and 12 weeks was a good distance or a good time amount to do a cut and then do a recovery. I said, you know what, I did the opposite, so let me go for the shortest. And then I said I'm going to do 6 weeks of a cut, 6 weeks of a maintain, 6 weeks of a cut. And it's got so reliable that a few months ago I was actually able to make a plan for where I would be by Christmas 83, and we're actually prior to Christmas now. I'm kind of beating.
I think there's a reason for that, which is the keto stuff, which we can get to in a sec.
Sure, but when I started doing that, and I did a few cycles of it, I thought doing 6 weeks, losing 3 kilos, 6 weeks of maintenance, which feels like a holiday. You get like 400 or 500 calories more. And then 6 weeks, okay, now I have to dedicate focus a little bit more. And then 6 weeks of another holiday. Kind of did two things for me. One, it gave me certainty around, this can be an easier process and I can do it. It might take longer, but it's easier.
Did it really take longer?
Probably not.
Well, you'd been for, 30, 20 years, whatever it is, not losing weight.
Exactly.
So it was faster.
It's faster. And but it gave me certainty around, to the point where I could make a plan around it. And now I could say, okay, by Christmas I'll be 83 kilos. And that now, like, it puts me in a position right now where I can make a plan for 2025. Now I don't know what that is, and we'll talk about that later, but I'm certain with the systems that I have, at least around cutting and maintaining, bulking I have no clue about yet, but that's a whole other story.
Well, first let's lose the obesity.
But a plan used to be almost wishful thinking rather than certainty. That's where I'll be at because I know I am going to follow the process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it was weird to see you for the first time kind of, lay it out and be like, okay, 6 weeks. And I believed you as well. I remember there was like he's going to do that. And it was the first time around this stuff. And this was, I don't know how much, 2 months ago maybe. It's like, I believe this is what he'll do. I don't know how long ago it was exactly. It might have been 6 months, but
the timing isn't the point. But like, I started to trust myself with what I would do with the diet. And I think when you've learned to trust yourself and you follow through on it, other people can then start to trust you more because you're actually doing what you say you do. Whereas with food, I wasn't
when you
doing
used
that
to tell me, it wasn't limited to food, but I think it's expanded because of it. I'm like, whatever you say, let's see what happens. It was my attitude a lot when you gave me these kinds of plans and future things. Because in the moment it was fine, and you were very good with that kind of spontaneous stuff, but it was anything in the future, and honestly it was a bit more of a general conversation.
Sure,
it was a bit hard to believe. It's like sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes we say. And so when it was this kind of more long-term thing, it's like, yeah, no, I believe he'll do that. Like, it wasn't even, I didn't even question it too much. It's like, huh, interesting. He's changed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me that's even the most valuable thing out of this. It's not the losing of the weight or the body fat or the gaining of the muscle.
Yeah.
It's more, I trust myself more,
Mm-hmm.
and that means other people can trust me more.
Yeah, definitely.
I think that's number one. And number two, then, the physical aspect is really good. I saw a video, I actually posted it on Instagram today, from a Pakistani lady called Sadia.
Mm-hmm.
She's a psychologist, and she says to people who come to her for psychology, for support,
Yeah.
if they are overweight, she'll often send them away and say, go get a personal trainer, get in shape, and you mightn't even need me when you've got that in place. And I kind of understand that now, because I trust myself more.
Yeah.
Other people trust me more, but I did it through the medium of getting myself in shape.
Yeah.
So, but whereas what she says is, if I don't do that, they'll get feel good moments, they'll get insights, but then they'll go off and eat a cake and,
Actually, I remember
undermine themselves.
This was before you went on this journey, but every now and again, I'd call you and I'd be like, oh, I'm not feeling great, I'd have something. And there was one time where you're like, have you been working out? And I was like, no, not really. It's like, okay, work out for a month and then let's talk again. I never called you back.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I never called you back for that reason. And I think you've also been realizing it recently. I know it requires a little bit of effort sometimes to convince yourself, but the fact that you can trust yourself, the fact that you have energy, the fact that you have positive stuff like hormones and everything flowing through you. I don't mean in like a voodoo way. I mean just, your body's being used. You actually resolve a lot of these deep-seated issues you have that are just your mind's way of telling you that you're not okay. And half the time, you're literally just physically not okay. And a lot of stuff, not everything, because there's loads of stuff that might not be exactly that,
sure,
is literally just your body being like, I can't use myself. I can't do things. Of course I feel bad.
Yeah.
Of course I feel lethargic. Of course I feel like I don't feel like this, or I want to do the lazy version of things. You know what I mean? And I think you were a prime example, but I think there's even probably better examples, because you weren't necessarily in that bad of a mental space. At least you didn't think you were. Of how much it just impacts your life, and it's not just I have abs. You know what I mean? Actually, what's funny is the more you go down it, the less abs become important. And abs in that metaphorical I look good kind of sense. Now you also do look good, but that's not the point.
Yeah, but it's more, I respect myself, I take care of my body, I take care of my life type thing.
Yeah. And that one thing I do want to say is that depends on the approach. Like, there are people that take it too far, they take it to extremes, and no matter how good they look, they're still not healthy necessarily, right?
Sure.
So it's not, he has a six-pack, he must be healthy mentally, but he's probably better off than the guy who's 20 kilos overweight, 15 kilos overweight, to be honest. He's probably in a better, because at least he can run. Honestly, that makes a big difference.
For sure. Well, there was another element that came in this year, because we're kind of working to where we're at, was I'd say about 5 months ago now, or maybe 6 for you.
Yeah.
You got to start
monitoring. 5 or 6 for
when you got a monitor for sleep.
Yeah.
And then about a month later, I think I got it, and that kind of brought me back to the Brian Johnson sleep. I was starting to be able to direct my eating. And my exercise, but sleep came in, and this is kind of a new one, as in, you said, all right, John, get the Whoop. I got the Whoop, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a go. Will I really want it? Is it worth it? But I found that after about 6 weeks of focusing on the sleep, and I'm sure a lot more to go in terms of improvement of it, I was probably getting an hour extra a night of something like that. And I started feeling just more relaxed in my day. It was kind of an overall feeling of, and I simply recognize I've been undersleeping. You know how they say obese people are actually under-muscled? I actually think I was underslept.
I have a really interesting tidbit about this, which is an extra hour of sleep, assuming you're underslept, is like doing all of the steroids. It's a bit of an exaggeration, but on a muscular level, it's much cheaper to sleep an extra hour than it is to do the amount of drugs it would take to get you that same benefit.
Yeah.
That's assuming you're underslept, right? If you sleep enough, going over is a bit of a negligible effect. But it's really interesting because you're like, oh well, sleep, sleep is for, when I'm dead,
Well, I would have even often said that, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like I had a problem, I would literally call it a problem. I used to wake up in the middle of the night and read for an hour, and I've been doing that for 20 odd years. It's not a new thing.
Yeah.
And I started having when I'd wake up and let's say you want to go to the toilet, I'd come back to bed and I'd say, okay, well, don't go for a book or don't go for the phone. And I actually have to have the conversation with myself. Stay in bed and go to sleep. It's worth it. And then sometimes I don't. Sometimes I get up and I do things. But I'm definitely staying in bed more because I'm realising that it's a high priority and the benefits are so worth it. But I'm still in that conversion process.
Yeah.
But it's already having beneficial effects,
Yeah. Actually, the reason I said that muscle thing is because, even if you don't care about the sleep, it's like, well, a lot of reasons people start, and I think this is important as well. It doesn't matter why you start. If you're going down a better journey, if it's out of hate, start. Use that energy. If it's out of wanting to look good and you think it's superficial though, so you shouldn't, start. Use that energy.
Absolutely.
If it's for some deep, health thing, it's probably not, because if you're in the state you're currently in, you probably don't care that much about your health, even though you might say you do. But having that extra supplement is not, you don't care as much as you think. So it's probably a superficial, a bad reason. But the reality is, the reason doesn't matter if you use it to push you in a positive direction.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes we look for the right moment or the right reason or the right way. And what also you showed was, you started out of fear potentially, right? Because of that body fat percentage thing as one of the reasons.
Absolutely.
Sometimes you have loads of reasons. It's not always about
reason.
One particular reason. But I don't know. I think it's important that it will be imperfect at the start, because also if you're the kind of person who got yourself in a position to be in an imperfect position generally, your initial reasons probably are going to be imperfect. They're not going to be perfect. You're probably going to make loads of mistakes. It's the continuing, trying to get better, trying to be more consistent, trying to be more stable. I think that's something that helped a lot was the need. Actually, I remember we had one good conversation where it was basically, I told you, do this workout for 6 weeks without changing it. Think of all of the changes, and in 6 weeks we can implement them.
Absolutely.
And then you will have to do that for 6 weeks. You're not allowed to change it between now and then. And all of a sudden you start becoming more consistent. Why? Because you were more consistent. You weren't changing the workout each time.
I know, I would have been used to, if I had a new idea, I'd want to implement the change straight away rather than put it on a backlog and then wait for the end of the 6 weeks, which was sort of a new approach,
But that was a general attitude. It was do exactly what I set out for a set period of time, and after that I can use all of the learnings. Because if you're in a rush to do it now, you're spinning your wheels as well, right? You might be going really, really fast, but it's slick and you're just...
Well, one thing I want to say that has really made it helpful for me is, one is the willingness to take feedback, and second is the fact that it's measurable.
Mm-hmm.
So if we take sleep, for example, I look at my HRV, my heart rate variability, and not the individual thing, but the trend. And the trend is now going up over the 4 or 5 months that I'm using it.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about snapshot moments versus trends in a minute when we get to weight. But so for me, HRV is kind of my go-to for, am I recovering enough with respect to sleep? then with eat, and I just want to talk a little bit about the metrics,
Sure.
is the inputs are the calories and the protein. They're kind of the key ones. Now I do look for some micronutrients or whatever, but there's a clear number on them. What's the number of calories I need and what's the number of protein I need? Now with protein, and the reason why I call it Warriors Over 50 is once you hit over 35 or 40, protein synthesis becomes less effective.
Yeah.
So instead of 1.6 grams of protein per kilo, you need about 1.9 grams. And a lot of people don't know that. You actually need more because you're older, because protein synthesis doesn't work as well. In two ways. One is you need total quantity more, and the other is the amino acid of the ones that we take in, leucine, actually is the kickstarter for protein synthesis.
Yes.
And when you're older, if you don't get more than 30 grams of protein in a meal, you don't have enough leucine to kickstart your protein synthesis.
Yeah,
so in breakfast...
it's the same when you're younger. It's just when you're younger you need smaller...
Well, the threshold is much lower and the total quantity is much lower. But like all of these things matter when you get to, I call it Warriors Over 50, but anyone over 35 or 40, you literally, when you hit your peak of whether it's your VO2 max or your muscle or your whatever, there's a degradation in systems and you need to compensate for those degradations. And so the metrics for me are calories and protein, and then I can look at the body weight and it's an output as such,
No, I think a big thing, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is really focusing on the inputs. The outputs don't matter so much. They're just telling you how your inputs are affecting. And usually, and we've talked a lot about weight, but something I want to make clear, which is something that, you got to be patient, because just pushing all of your beliefs at once doesn't make sense. But you get to a point where weight itself doesn't really matter, right?
Absolutely.
But because it is an output, because it is an effect of, like for example, for me, going up in weight can be a good or a bad thing depending on what I'm trying to achieve. Going down in weight can be a good or a bad thing, which indicates that, okay, weight is an indicator, but clearly the weight itself doesn't matter, right? And but we're very attached to weight at the beginning, right? And actually, I'd love for you to tell me, because you've had a bit more of an attachment to weight than I have had, right?
Yeah, I kind of, for a long time I've known, because I did weightlifting when I was younger, that body fat is more important than weight.
Yeah.
But what I've learned in the last year or so is that skeletal muscle is even more important again. So just the amount of muscle you have, or at least this is my understanding, the amount of muscle you have on your body is the thing that sort of supports your health span. Lifespan being how long you live, and your health span how healthy. Because if you have more muscles as you get older, you can prevent yourself from falling, you can do things, you can have a healthy life. And just to say, in that, I keep track of that as well. I started at 44.8% skeletal muscle, now I'm 48.3%. I need to get to 49 just to be in the healthy range, and I want to get to 54. But I'm not that the numbers matter so much. No, actually, I want to get back up to a healthy muscle area.
So before we get into that, it's important to note that the stage in your journey changes the metrics that are important to you.
For sure.
Like if you're morbidly obese, or let's say 30+% body fat, your skeletal muscle, anything you do will increase it. It doesn't matter that much. At that point, your best indicator is your weight, because there's no world where putting on weight is the better option.
Sure.
And, even if you do lose a little bit of muscle, you're better off losing most of that weight.
Sure.
Right? And so that is the most important metric when you're in that stage, or if you're also clinically underweight as well. Then it's more important that you put on weight than any other metric. Then once you've gotten your weight into a reasonable range, then it becomes body fat.
Yeah,
right?
so like me.
Then after the body fat, and so the point is, it depends. Like what your current state is actually still body fat.
Yeah.
It's more important that you get under the obesity level than it is to get your muscle to a certain high degree. Because even if you've a really long health span, if you die before you get to the point where it's below a certain level, it doesn't matter.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And so actually being not obese anymore is more important. Then once you get past that threshold, you have the right and you deserve to say, okay, now my muscle percentage matters more.
Sure.
It's easy to jump the gun and say,
well,
that's what they look for. It's like, yeah, but that guy is 12% body fat. You know, he's a professional bodybuilder in his off season, because they wouldn't be on the on season. And they look at certain things that you don't have, not the right, you can look at them, but it's not useful for you to look at them. You are earlier. You look at earlier things. And it's too easy to try to do the advanced things. It's like, you're not at the same level as them, so you probably can't look at the same things as them.
Absolutely.
You know?
And like where I'm at now, just to explain that, maybe we'll go a little bit towards the future based on this, is I'm 83 kilos, which is in a healthy weight range.
Yeah.
I'm 25% body fat, which is still not in a healthy range. And from our discussions, what I really want to do is get myself below 20 as my next goal, because then once I'm below 20, it opens up other strategies around sort of bulking and maintaining and cutting to actually increase muscles, etc.
And something to note for you, because these are percentages.
Yeah.
If you are dropping your body fat percentage and you're doing it correctly, your muscle percentage just naturally increases.
Sure.
Right? So it's not that focusing on the earlier metrics means that the other metrics don't benefit. It's just you're not at a point where that's the most useful metric to look at.
Sure.
And not you, but just, you know, like the guy who's 120 kilos of fat, right? 'Cause there's, you know, massive people and they actually are 120 kilos and are a lot of muscle. But if you're 120 kilos, your body fat percentage, I mean, the difference between being 35 and 33% body fat, it looks the same, right?
Yeah.
So look at your weight. Don't try to get all finicky. Once you're at a point where it's like, okay, this is a reasonable, maybe, I don't know, depending on how tall you are, it depends so much. So I'm not going to give a number. Let's say it's under 95 kilos, for example, or 90 kilos. Let's say 90 kilos for you. Once you're at that point, now, okay, the body fat percentage all of a sudden became more important, relatively speaking.
Yeah.
And so it really is important what you look at, but I think this comes back to the transparency, to the reality of the situation is, it's not what you want to see, it's what you should actually be looking at that has the biggest effect. And I actually want to call you out here. I think you are jumping the gun a little bit, looking at that muscle, you know, because you're not actually...
I have a tendency to do that.
Which, you're not the only one, and I think this is a good example for anyone that's listening, is we all do it. I do it all the time. I look for the next thing, and the wise person is the one who knows how to slow themselves down, realize they're doing it, because they will do it, but realize they're doing it and say, okay, but this is where I am. This is my current situation. This is the thing that will have the most effect. And this other thing will improve.
Sure.
But this is the thing that is going to get me the closest to my goals. And do I want to get to my goals, or do I want to feel good because I'm doing some advanced thing?
Absolutely. You know? Absolutely. And like on that, with my next step is like, I'm at 83 and that was a goal. And why did I pick that goal? I didn't say that in the beginning.
Oh yeah, very
When I was the fittest in my life, 1994, I remember very well. I was in New York, I was running, etc. I was 83 kilos. I was running 5 days a week with very good athletes. And in my memory, that was the best I ever felt. So I thought I wanted to be 83 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
I am now more or less 83 kilos, but I realized that because of my body composition and where I'm at, I probably now have to go lower. But if you had talked to me a year ago,
I tried to talk to you a year ago.
Going lower than 83, it was full resistance. I didn't
Which
want to
rightfully now I learned as well, you know.
And now I'm looking at it, and I've looked at the various charts and whatever, and I'm open to, let's put it this way, I've had this conversation already, to go to 75 kilos if that will bring my body fat down to where it needs to be to take on other strategies to go to the next level. So, but I couldn't have told you this even 6 months ago because I wasn't open-minded, I wasn't close enough, I couldn't tell you why. But now I kind of go...
No, I mean, from outside it was very obvious. You had a strong attachment, you had a strong belief that 83 was an ideal you, would make you feel like a 20-year-old again. That's what it looked like from outside.
Absolutely.
And I was like, well, looking at the maths, sometimes it's not about the maths. That's the point as well.
Yeah.
Looking at the maths, that doesn't make any sense, right? There's no way you're going to be in a good, and like good as in an ideal body fat range and be 83 kilos. But I realize now it didn't make any sense to push you on that. You had to learn it for yourself. Right, you have to get to 85 kilos and see it.
It's only the last 2 weeks, and actually it was a conversation I had with you and your brother Liam around what's for my size. I think the healthy range is something between 64 and 86, so in the middle of it is 75, and I said, okay, well, then I'll be prepared to go to 75. So on my next part of this journey is to reduce that body fat to below 20 or 20 or below, and then from there
the range I've given you is between 10 and 20. I want to keep making that
sure.
Because because you put 20 as if like you hit 20 and you're done. It's like no, it's
no, but 20 is the you said that was the maximum I could be to take on some strategies that we were talking about.
Because otherwise you don't have enough of a buffer, realistically.
Right? Well, and that's all ahead. So really the next part is about losing more body fat, which probably means more weight, and continue with the good eating, the good sleeping,
but it's kind of like
eating,
season
and training.
2 though, because now once you hit these thresholds, because we're not quite there yet, it's not going to be about whack anymore, right? It's not going to be from a position of weakness, just trying to get to a good level, because when you're obese and you're trying to get to a normal body fat percentage, you're coming from a position of weakness, trying to get yourself into an okay position. You are now actually you've reached the water level, the sea level, and now you're trying to climb up a mountain, right? So you were drowning. Now you're getting to see. You can see the sea level, and you started.
Water at least.
Yeah. Well, you're looking at. No, you're not under 25%. So you're looking at the water. You're like right by the water, okay? And you're like, I can climb that mountain, right? Yeah. And the point is, once you go through that water, you're now climbing a mountain. So it will be another journey. It's a different journey to go from kind of a weak position into, okay, at least my head's above water, to, oh, well, now I want to become stronger. And it makes my life better, but it doesn't. So how do I put this? So being obese makes your life worse, but not being obese doesn't make your life better. It just makes your life not worse.
Yeah.
Right?
Gotcha.
Now you will be going to a point where it's just benefit, but not having that doesn't make your life worse. It makes your life not better.
Gotcha.
Do you get what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I think you're almost, because you don't get to say it until you're below the threshold, at season 2. And I think it'll be a second journey. So actually, I think it was very much coincidence, but it's a good time to have this chat because it's kind of the end of season 1.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, well, it feels like another thing about it is I don't think it's just a quick transformation. Like already I'm 1 year, 3 months more or less on this journey. Mm-hmm. And I did a bit of a rough calculation, still future, and to do what I want to do at the pace I've been working at, assuming I make as many ups as I did so far, it's at least a 3-year journey to get to where I want to go.
Which is hard to tell original Jonathan.
Yeah, but like if somebody said to me, oh, Jonathan, you can do this all in 60 days. I don't know. I think those 60-day ideas are great to kickstart you in the right direction and give you a framework. But
I don't agree. I actually disagree. But continue, but I'll tell you.
Yeah, but I actually now know that, and I think I did reasonably okay. For me, it's a 3-year journey, and I don't see how it wouldn't be a 2-3 year journey for somebody else either. Yeah.
So I think there's two things.
Yeah.
So one, if somebody says 30-60 days, it's the start of a yo-yo diet, even if you get to the end of it, right? Because you're doing something purposely unsustainable. Like nobody, if you talk to the guy who made that, he knows it's unsustainable. Like he will tell you, yes, you cannot do this. Like don't do this for 180 days. Like you won't survive it if you do it for 180 days. So that means they know it's unsustainable. But you do need to, so there's actually three things. You need to get to a level of maturity where you can say, well, I want to plan to do something sustainable. And then something that's really important as well is don't plan, and I think this is something I used to repeat to you at the beginning, now you've just been doing it for long enough where it's not really an issue anymore. Don't plan for longer than you've been doing the thing.
Yeah.
So if you haven't been doing it for more than a week, you're not allowed to plan for more than a week in the future, right? If you haven't been doing, because it's like, well, I did it for a week, I know I can do it for another week. If I'm here and I tell you, all right, let's plan the next 3 years, that's so overwhelming. And you're like, oh, but I'm better than everyone. No, you're not.
No, but I
right?
feel
not
now,
you. Just if you tell me I'm better than, don't worry, I can handle it. No, you're not. You're here, right?
No, but what
you have this problem.
I've done it for over a year now, so I think I can plan for a year ahead.
You can plan for a year, exactly. But I wouldn't tell you plan for the next 5 years. I'd tell you plan for the next year. Right? Yeah. And then I'm sure you get to a point, but then, there's also a point of diminishing returns where if I tell you I'm going to plan for the next 10 years, I'm going to plan what? You know what I mean? But so it's interesting because I think, and something, especially when you get over 50, as warriors over 50, is, you have to be more mature. And I think from outside, and I know it's rich coming from a 25-year-old, is you're not as mature as you think you are, right? And you have to be more mature. You have to kind of be better and realize slow is fast. Right?
Oh, absolutely. And like one of the things I see is this is all about upping my standards, and it's about upping my standards forever. So even each one of those maintenance that I do is a new standard, and I'm maintaining that new standard. And even like at the end of next year or 3 years in total or whenever it is, whatever standards I reach by then, because my standards have already improved in the last year.
Yeah.
I need to maintain them for the rest of my life in order for this to really be worth it. Because if I just drop off the standards, and the reason why I'm saying is, like, what happened in a year and 3 months is how I sleep is different. What I drink and what I eat is different. My routine, my daily routines and weekly routines are different from 3 days a week running, 3 days a week hypertrophy training. And that is all, my whole lifestyle is reshaping. And that takes time to actually adjust to and become normalized.
Yeah. And really, and I think what you did well when it started working is, just to double down, is you're doing one thing at a time. You're normalized. You do, you normalize. You add, you normalize. You add, you normalize. And what you used to do was you try to add 20 things, and it's, of course they're not going to stick around, right? And just balancing 20 new things is almost impossible. And no matter how smart you are, because you're a pretty smart guy, so if you can't do it, other people have no hope. And not that you're smarter than everyone, but even if you are smarter than him, you probably can't do it. But the point is, you started, really, really humbling yourself, saying, look, I'm going to make this as simple as possible, as easy, like a kid can do this. And it should be that way, because if you're going to do it for the next 20, 30, I don't know, how long are you going to live?
I don't know.
What's your health span versus lifespan? It has to be simple, because if you want to be able to do it for 10 years, even, let's not look further than that. Like, good luck doing something complex for 10 years in a row, and while also not having, like, it's not like you're a competitive athlete where your life very immediately depends on it, right? Like, if you don't do this in an immediate way, you could almost say your life is worse today, potentially. I don't think it is. But when you're beginning, you're like, well, my life is worse because I can't have that burger, or I can't have that thing, or I can't have that snack, or I can do this thing if I don't do that, or I might have to say no to certain things with friends, or maybe I have to say no to certain friends because they don't make me feel as good, right? But so it's not easy, and so make it as simple as possible. And we kept coming back to this. Right.
Well, that's, and this relates to business and every other thing. I like a guy called Alex Hormozy who wrote Watch, and it's not about the one big thing. It's actually about 1,000 little tweaks that make a business work well.
The phrase he uses is it's not a silver bullet, it's 100 golden BBs. I think that's the
phrase. Okay, yeah. Well, maybe it wasn't him, but that idea that it's a lot of little things that actually make something great, not one big thing. And I'm continuously tweaking now, and this is, I like how you said it. This is season 1 is over now. Where I'm kind of like
not over. You're really close. I know. The last few weeks of a season are always the hardest.
I'm in the home
because
run.
You think you're there, but you still have to step over the finish line.
Absolutely. But
a marathon doesn't finish at 40 kilometers. You still have 2 kilometers to go.
Absolutely. But I feel I'm in the home straight.
That's true. But that's the hardest straight, because you think you kind of relax, and that's why it gets so hard. And why you feel like I've done it. But, it's not you, it's everyone, I think, has this attitude. I know you keep saying no, but I'm here to be honest with you, not to...
Absolutely, and that's probably one of the main things is I'm open to the feedback now, and I think that the thing is, every time I come to you, the feedback I get is harder and higher and a better standard. So I imagine when I do cross over into to season 2, more will be required of me, but I'm okay with that now. I kind of accept that.
Yeah, I mean,
that's
to be
the
better,
conversation.
You got to be better, right? I think it's kind of an easy way to put it. It doesn't get easier. I mean, it gets easier to do the things you're doing now, but if you want to continuously improve, you have to, give your body and give your mind a reason to keep improving. Because if you stay the same, it'll just normalize. And this level is easier. And it might get to a point where you're happy and you're like, look, honestly, I have no desire to keep improving. But even then, what is it? If you're not growing, you're dying.
Yeah.
And that's so real for people as well. Because if you're not growing, you're dying. Especially once you're over like 30, 40, 50, whatever it is. Your body is actively fighting against you. So if you're not forcing it to improve, and it always is, but once you're over certain ages, it becomes something you can't ignore.
Yeah.
Right? You have to keep pushing it even a little bit. You might not have to go as hard on the new stuff, but you always have to continuously improve, and it only gets harder. You only have to push it. Like, I have to push myself harder in the gym than you do because I've been doing it longer. It's not easier. It's harder. I come back. Now, this I have to figure out, and maybe if somebody has a good tip on this, please do. Sometimes I come back after legs and I get told I look a little bit like a ghost. Okay. And I'm like, yeah, because I pushed really hard and I ate beforehand. It's like I drank. It's not like I didn't do the thing, but I look a little like a ghost, which doesn't happen to you yet, No,
I know.
But you see how it's harder? It's not easier to be further down the road. Yeah, I know. So no, it's just interesting because we initially have this false belief that it'll get easier. It's like, oh, you're fit. It must be easy for you.
No, to maintain a higher standard.
Yeah, no, maybe not for you, but I think it's worth talking about because it's easy to look at the guy who's in good shape and say, oh, it must be really easy for him.
Yeah. And he's on his journey wherever he's at.
Yeah, God knows what he's struggling with.
Yeah.
Like, it might not be the thing you're struggling with, but that doesn't mean it's not something.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks very much, Michael. I think that was an honest conversation about
that's why I'm here.
Where I was at and the feedback, and I'm looking forward to the next phases as well, because as I said the other day, I'm wearing a pair of trousers with a waist skinnier than I have in a long time.
Those are my pairs of trousers.
And funny enough, if plans go the way they go, within a couple of months I might even be similar weight to you, which probably for your whole lifetime that has never happened,
No, not even close. I think this is the closest we've ever been.
Yeah,
it's getting closer.
Anyway, thanks very much, Michael.
Appreciate it. Yeah, it was a good chat.
It was a good chat.